So, hello everyone. This is Gus with the Everything Goes podcast. On this week's episode, I'm having my nephew, Anthony. Anthony is my guru, my go to guy when it comes to the video game world. And this week's episode, we're going to be talking about video games and the violence. Do they both correlate to the real world? Because as you could tell, in the last couple weekends, mass shootings and our president, so-called politicians, are bringing the fact that it's because video games are too violent. So on this week's episode, we're going to talk about video games and the violence it brings. So I'm giving you guys a little bit of a heads up that these are our opinions, and another one, a little bit of a heads up that the recording is not the greatest. This was my first phone interview, and as you could tell, I'm still working out the kinks, so I'm just giving you guys a little heads up. It's not the greatest recording. It's not the greatest sound. Hopefully, I want to be doing more of this, and hopefully we get it right or make it sound better. Okay? Hope you guys enjoy the show.
So, hello guys, this is Gus with the Everything Goes podcast. This week we have a special guest. His name is Anthony. He is my nephew. Reason I have him on is because he knows everything about video games. So what's up, Anthony? How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. Although, again, I have to check you on that everything about video games.
Yeah, well, you might not play every video game, but you know a lot about video games. So you're my expert on video games because
Fair enough.
you play the games that everybody plays. So I know I don't play all those games, so that's why I have you on the podcast. So what's up, Anthony? How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Staying in the loop in terms of video games, of course. Everything that's going on.
So the topic today that I want to talk with you is violent games and video games. In regards to what's going on with mass shootings, are they correlating? So that's the topic.
Right.
Violent video games.
And violence.
Do they make kids more violent? So we're gonna start off there. What do you think?
Well, just as a general stance on where I stand on that specific topic, I'm gonna have to go with no. They don't. I'd say, for the most part, any level-headed kid, someone who has common sense and has parents that are usually there to teach them right from wrong, they play a violent game and they know that you don't do things like that in real life. That's not how you go about solving your problems, or you just don't take the nearest gun and walk out and start using it on people. So I'd say that no, it's absolutely not true.
So, unlike our president, and this is what our president said, I'm not directly quoting him, but he is scapegoating the video games for the mass violence. That's what he's doing. He's blaming the violence in our video games. And yes, our video games have gotten a lot violent, but like my opinion, I don't think we have a problem with video games. But how do you feel when the president says something like that?
I feel like he doesn't look into these things himself. He hasn't touched a video game, that he sees it kind of at base value, and that's it. He looks at the content, sees blood, sees gore, and just immediately says, that's the reason that we have people going out and taking arms. And that's not the case. A lot of the time there are more prominent root problems that go into why they do things, and a lot of it happens to do with whether they have deeper issues concerning their mental health or their emotional health, things of that sort. So for him to just casually say, oh yeah, it's video games that are causing all these random acts, well, that's not true. Because, things like TV shows, movies, so on and so forth, things of that nature, the media, the other media content that can be gory, doesn't, you don't hear anybody saying that, hey, this show is causing people to go do this. For example, Breaking Bad, everybody knows that show. It's not causing people to go do drugs.
Yeah.
So in the same sense, video games wouldn't be going out and causing children or adolescents or even adults to go do these things. I think that for the most part, the president is just using it as a scapegoat, just to pin something down so everybody has a common enemy.
Yeah. Well, specifically him. He's an older president, so I don't even think he plays video games.
I
So
doubt he's had time to even think
you
about
get
it.
me?
Yeah.
Just like any other politician that says the video games are violent and that's what's making all these mass shootings or committing more crimes. I don't think any of these people have ever played, or and if they do, I strongly I don't think they would make those links between video games and what's going on with these mass shootings or violence that's going across America at these times. But you said a specific like example there where God, I forget what you just said.
Um, we be talking about the media part,
No, the movie part. I'm sorry. Yes, the movie parts. Not
right?
everybody can correlate. If that's the case, why don't they do it to movies? Because movies have, if you notice, movies nowadays are more they're more popular than ever. There's more violence. There's stuff being blown up, and you don't hear the same kind of stuff on what's it called? And movies. They're not blaming movies for like the bombings and stuff like that. So you made a really good example on that, I think.
I mean, I make that specific example because for example, Avengers. It's a great movie, but it does have a lot of violence, a lot of fighting, a lot of themes that are a little more mature than many might think would go into more or less a family-friendly heroes movie. But
Yeah.
because of that, again, you don't hear politicians or anybody really saying, "Oh, hey, people are doing this because of this movie or these movies in particular." It's games that they really want to pin down for whatever reason, and I think I think even if you try to bring up statistics and whether
Yeah.
there's a connection between violence and crime, I can't even say that that's really prominent to take a look at. I can't say that that could be a reason. Whether there is a connection or not, I feel like there could no statistically there is a connection, but it's extremely minute.
Yes.
So for somebody to actually say, "Hey, this is an actual problem that this is causing a vast majority of our violence of this nature," that again, that's not true. You can't say that. Studies have shown
Yeah.
that there could be a connection, but not a direct connection between the shootings that have been happening as of late and, of course, video games.
Yeah. I want to bring some statistics in here, but I will bring them up again before we're done with this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to ask you specific questions. Do you think video games are more violent? The reason I say that is because you are a very good first-person shooter player. And since I've known you all my life, I've known that you've been playing video games, first shooter games for a long time. For a
Yes,
long time.
I have.
So from what I remember, you've been playing at least 10 years of shooting games.
Oh yeah,
So do you
just
think that
about.
do you think from the days that you played Halo to the games now, which is what is it, Call of Duty, some of the like the PUBG or like even the Fortnite, do you think that are they more violent than they were back in those days?
I think so. Yeah. I things like Call of Duty, I won't say they've gone up in violence. Halo, I think, has actually gone down in violence. But a game that stands out to me as a first-person shooter with a heavy emphasis on violence is going to be a game like Doom. That's a very, very violent game. By the same token, it's a game that isn't based, in unrealistic terms.
Yeah.
The game just isn't realistic enough for anybody, or I would believe for anybody to take seriously. You're not going to take a shotgun and go straight up to some man-eating monster like in Doom.
Yeah.
Nobody does this. But whether or not they're getting violent, of course, you look at a game that isn't a first-person shooter, but Mortal Kombat. That's extremely violent.
Yeah. Yes, they are.
Another game that could be considered violent and especially has mature themes, Grand Theft Auto. I don't think it gets any better as time goes on.
And for anybody that's ever played Grand Theft Auto, you know what those games are about, right? Can you briefly explain how Grand Theft Auto the concept of the game is?
So
Because
for the concept of Grand Theft Auto has always been something along the lines of you're somebody trying to make money and you resort to using criminal activity to do so. So in that case, it comes to stealing cars or selling drugs, things of that nature, really.
Yeah.
From stealing cars to doing drugs, alcohol, nudity is not necessarily heavily emphasized, but it's not something that game shies away from either. Sometimes it encourages you to go to things like, the in-game strip clubs, so on and so forth.
Yeah. I remember that. Vividly.
So no, go on.
So, I'm more from the generation where we used to play a lot more fighting games, like specifically Mortal Kombat, specifically Street Fighter, and it never made me want to go out there and kick ass or do some of the stuff that these politicians are saying that these video games are doing. I just feel that politicians always use these things for their own purposes of whatever they're trying to gain. What do you think on that?
I would heavily agree on that. As I said earlier, it's really easy for you to kind of put the blame on something and then have everybody rally up against that. And it also makes you look good at the same time because it means that you've identified an enemy and you have an agenda to go against it. And that kind of brings people together. It shows them that you supposedly know what you're talking about. But that's kind of how I see it. I look at the president, and it sure helps him a whole lot, at least in his image, for those who don't really understand video games. If he says, hey, this is a problem, and people trust their president, what are they going to do? They're going to be like, okay, well, our president knows what's up. Clearly, we can get behind him, and we can trust him.
Yeah. Well, everybody knows in the United States, everybody loves video games. Who doesn't? Everybody. Well, let me give you some statistics. This is from NBC. More than 165 million Americans enjoy video games. That's a lot of people playing video games, man.
Oh, yeah, but video games are everywhere. Your phone, computer, whatever console that you have, if you do have one. I'm not sure there's a way that you can't touch a video game these days, Yeah. If you're just sitting at home, not doing anything, and you've got a phone in your hand, you're most likely playing a video game.
Yeah, well, check this out. Billions of people play video games according to NBC. So worldwide, more than a billion people play video games. You don't see billions of people committing violent crimes. It's only a very few. And then the fact that the media kind of puts it out there, it makes it like there is a problem, that we do have a problem with video games. I feel like that part of what the media is doing, I feel like that is I think you mentioned it earlier, where it's not just the video game making the person more violent. I think it's just a personal problem, kind of like the kid has
they have deeper issues somewhere rooted in there. Yeah,
they do have deeper issues. It's just, I feel like this, the argument we're talking about, they scapegoat video games. So how does that make you feel? Remember, this is your community. This is why I have you on the podcast this week, because that's your community, man.
When I hear people use video games as a scapegoat to violence, it clearly shows that they don't have a very good understanding of video games themselves and just exactly how they affect people. For the most part, they are enjoyed as entertainment and entertainment only. They're not enjoyed as anything more or anything less than entertainment. And that's the way it really should be. The way I've always put it is, I'd say video games sometimes can be enjoyed as nothing more than, I guess, a very interactive book. It's got a little more meat to it sometimes. Sometimes the book isn't as great, things like that. But I don't understand the concept of, hey, this game is causing everyone to be violent. And I think what people really need to understand is the kind of place where video games fall. And video games fall, again, under the media side of content. So it falls under movies, TV shows, and things of that sort. And because of that, you look at media violence as a whole, and it's the lowest contributor to societal crimes ever. That's just what it is. It's the lowest contributor. So media violence alone is the lowest contributor, and you're trying to pinpoint video games, a small section, or maybe no, I'd say it's smaller than movies and TV shows for right now. Definitely growing, but smaller than TV shows and that sort. And you are pinning on this one particular thing, video games, not media violence as a whole, but just video games. And you're saying that that's the root for all of these violent actions. I can't get behind that.
Yeah. No, I disagree. I agree with you, and I disagree with the president, and I disagree with a lot of the politicians that are making video games sound bad. But I have another question. So, do games cause violence or aggression? We talked about the violence aspect of it. Now, the aggression. The only reason I asked about the aggression is because you know that when everybody plays video games, we all either get frustrated with something, or even if we play Tetris or Pac-Man, we get frustrated and we kind of get pissed off, and we're like, damn. What do you think?
Can it cause us to be aggressive? I would say, yeah. But although I say yes, it can cause us to be aggressive, there needs to be a look at what kind of aggression it's causing. Because for the most part, when you get frustrated, you're not out there punching the person next to you or, beating up the next guy. You're usually either beating up something inanimate, like, people break their controllers, people throw their monitors out the window, throw their consoles. And sure, it's a little childish, but that's usually about as far as people go as aggression.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe something else is you're insulting the dude who's maybe beating you in a certain game. But that's about it. Your aggression doesn't go very far. And while you can get aggressive, you're getting aggressive because you're frustrated. And you're frustrated at the game. So you're usually taking out that aggression in some way on the game. Be it your controller, be it, you just stop playing entirely. You have to walk around for a bit, take a breather.
Or punch a wall like I used to.
Or punch a wall, punch something, but it's usually not a person.
Right? Or you see it online where like people start throwing their TVs around and their consoles.
Punch a hole straight in their monitor, yeah.
You see that very often. Now that we're talking about that, I know video games is very popular, and aggression and all those kind of type of disorders will come with video games. Now, video games, are they addictive? What do you think?
Are they a big thing?
Addicting. Are they an addicting?
Addicting. Okay. I think that they very much can be. For me, someone who's played a game, probably for an excessive, sometimes like 7, 6 or longer in terms of hours, they can definitely be addicting. Yeah. But then again, at that time, I had the time to spend on it. I didn't have too much to do, and I had the moments to go ahead and just be spending 7, 6 or more, or 6, 7 more hours on a game. So they can definitely be addicting, but that goes along the lines of as long as you're level-headed, you've got nothing important to do, that you don't have any more important priorities. I don't think it really matters how much time you spend on it, as long as you've got what you need to have done.
Yeah.
So in the same sense, I would kind of compare it to any other form of entertainment. As long as you have nothing else pressing at the moment that needs to be done first, like you don't have to go to sleep early, you don't have to be ready at this time, or you don't need to have this done before you do anything. I've never really seen a problem with people spending more time on, video games, but of course it can be addicting. I think if it's not necessarily regulated for people who do have addictive tendencies, games can be addicting probably to a level they shouldn't be, where they'll find every moment to play something, even though they shouldn't be, where they're neglecting themselves, their health, and things of that nature. A great example to bring up on that front is Korea had put out, I believe, a law that had forced games to put a timer on them, I believe. Some sort of a timer that would stop players from just continuously playing because of the addictive nature to some games and the fact that there were people who were neglecting their health, not eating, not showering, not drinking anything, to the point where they might be dehydrated and have to go to like the hospital and that sort.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
but on that front, I think it's also, it could be a problem in terms of its addictive nature, yet at the same time, it also falls on the person. You have
yeah,
to be willing, or you have to be more than, maybe I worded that wrong. I think what I'm trying to get at is you need to be level-headed. You have to go in there knowing, hey, I can't be doing this. I still need to eat. I still need to go to sleep. I need to do all the things you would normally do to take care of yourself. You can't just start neglecting yourself over a game.
yeah. Well, in my experience with people that play video games, and remember, I'm in my late 30s, so I'm gonna tell you the people that I've known that play video games as old as me, because even at work, I've had people where all they think about is going back home and playing video games. Now imagine this: a 30-year-old guy. That's all he thinks about when he's at work. So in my opinion, I think they're very addictive. And another example I'm gonna give you. Another example. I'm gonna give you my example that I remember about you growing up, knowing you. All you wanted to do is play video games. Now, as a parent now, my oldest son is going through the same thing. He loves video games. He loves it. I'm telling you right now, because he's on vacation right now, summer vacation. Well, he hasn't started school yet, so he has one week left.
Right.
The first thing he does when he wakes up is either turn on the TV and play his Xbox, or wakes up or turns on his iPad. So on that aspect, I really believe that video games are very addicting.
I think they're addicting because they allow kind of, aside from entertainment, a sense of relief, and I wouldn't say stress-free, but for the most part, I think it could blow off a lot of steam.
Yeah.
So you had a tough day at work, you come home, and maybe you want to just play some NBA 2K something, basketball, or Madden, FIFA, things of the sort. You just want to get home, tough day, relieve some of that stress, and just have fun on that game. And on that front, it can be really addicting. Maybe you're having a tough time, and you can't wait to get home and play this game, just so you don't have to worry about anything else.
But then again, like I've told you, first player games or the shooting type games, you have campaigns or you play online all day, and that's all you do. You want to pass a certain game, and you're there 60 hours straight. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah, people get really invested in the games that they play, especially the nice online, vast, expansive multiplayer ones, the MMOs.
So I think that's where they attack the video game person, because they feel that they get consumed by the video game, that they're gonna go do something outside in the real world because of the video game, and that's why I think to me it doesn't correlate, because a lot of people that play video games know that that's a video game. We're not gonna go do that outside in the real world.
No, yeah. I mean, not only do they know it's a video game, they're playing it because it's a video game. They don't. What I don't understand is why people, for some reason, imagine that they want to take this violence and just use it as an excuse or use it as a reason to go do something atrocious in the real world. When the way I would probably look at it is, they know they can't do it in the real world, so they're doing it in a game.
Yeah.
I think there could be strong arguments saying that some violent games could relieve aggression that you've already have. And maybe sometimes, that's why when people are playing games, that they can be a little more aggressive than usual, because they're letting out those aggressive tendencies through a game. It's kind of like a conduit. You're letting out that energy with this game.
Yeah. Now, before I forget, the people that are listening to right now, because we're recording the podcast, but when I talk about mass shootings and violence, I want to specifically name these past shootings, or the one in El Paso, the one in Ohio, and there was one maybe I think last year about a guy that was playing the Madden. Madden's a football game. It's not necessarily a shooting game, but Madden. He lost and he came back and started shooting everybody on that tournament. That's how frustrated he was. But these are it's like very few. I don't want to say they're small. What happened? It's not a small thing that happened. But
I would probably say that games were a small factor in that there are very few cases in which that they specifically point out video games was their reason.
there were deeper issues there with these people.
Oh, definitely. I mean, if somebody's going out and taking a gun over Madden because, they weren't performing well, I think that definitely goes to show that there were deeper issues there and that the game was not to fall, especially a game that's meant to encourage sports. Like a sports game, and you're telling me that he went out to do this and he's going to specifically blame a game and it's because that he wasn't performing well in it? I mean, that's like a kid. In this case, unfortunately, it was a very severe tantrum, but that's more or less what he was throwing. It shouldn't have ever gone that far, and for that reason, there had to be deeper issues for someone to come to the conclusion, I'm not doing well in this game, so I'm going to do this.
Okay, another thing, the shooting in El Paso, the one maybe a couple weeks back, when they found the kid's manifesto, it said because he played a lot of Call of Duty. He had mentioned Call of Duty in his manifesto. And that's one of the reasons this debate started popping up again about violence and correlation to video games, violent video games. And again, for somebody to go out and do these type of violence in the community, there's something deeper in there, and not just the video games. There's something else in there.
There has to be something deeper. I mean, you're talking about someone who's writing a manifesto and putting a game in it. Like, realistically, how often do you ever hear or see that? And it's not very often.
Yeah. So now I have a question. You're in your early adulthood.
Yeah.
You just turned. I've been an adult for a couple years now. The reason I bring this up, the video games have, I want to say they have the E rating. Can you explain a little bit about the E rating and how it works?
So ratings in general work based off, I believe, the ESRB, which is the association that handles the ratings of games, and they rate games in terms of E for everyone, T for teens, M for mature, and A for adults only. Obviously, E for everyone. This is meaning kids can play it, adults can play it, teens. It's meant for E for everyone is usually games that target a very broad audience. They're trying to target as many people as they can, be it children, teens, and adults. Teens, it's usually meant more towards just teens. Maybe a few adults as well might hop into those games. Recently, I believe Halo 5 used to be rated M, but Halo 5 went for T for teens. That way they can just get a bit more people to be playing it, because once you reach M for mature, that's kind of where you reach the more adult themes in terms of a little bit of nudity, blood, references to drug and alcohol, and sexual references. And that's usually when you need to be 17 or older, and you do need an ID to prove your age to purchase those games. Or, of course, someone who's old enough to purchase the game for you. And then once you reach adult only, I do believe you have to be either 18 or 21 or older to purchase those games. Those are games that are usually so far and few, and I can't say most of it because I've never purchased a rated A game. They're extremely rare, and very few games ever make A games only, because they want people to buy it, and they're not going to make as much money from the game if only adults can purchase it. So very few people take that route.
The reason I ask you to explain the E rating is because I'm a parent, so obviously I'm gonna be looking at that E rating when I go buy my kid or my son a game. Now, when you were in your late teens, we all know that when we're teens, we're more independent. Did you ever have a problem with your parents when you were purchasing these games, or did your parents even know what you were playing?
My parents did know what I was playing. I was very transparent with the games that I liked, and I was very transparent with the games that I wanted. A game that probably took my parents a little more time to warm up to was definitely Grand Theft Auto, especially them knowing the kind of themes that were being presented in that game. So they were very cautious of Grand Theft Auto. Um, Call of Duty, I'd say they wouldn't. I did want to play it around 10, 11, since that game was very popular. I really wanted to play it. I think the only time I really got to actually play it is by the time I was 14. And the same thing goes with Grand Theft Auto. Just around 14, I was actually able to enjoy that game myself. Still being fairly young, I'd say 14 is still pretty young for a game like Grand Theft Auto at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
But my parents were rather lenient in terms of video games. They definitely knew what I wanted to play. My mother specifically, though, definitely trusted that I knew that she trusted that I wouldn't go out and take any bad influences from the game. Like I wouldn't be influenced to do this or that from that sort of game.
Yeah. Well, I'm a parent, and I'm gonna tell you that my son is not allowed to play Fortnite and some of these shooting games because mom, which is my wife and his mom, doesn't want him to be playing these violent games. So I get the fact that maybe he's too young to play these shooting games, but there's other parents that allow these kids, like specifically Fortnite, very cartoonish. So it's like it tends to be played by even some of the youngest kids doing these dances and all that. But it's a first shooting game. Did you ever have an issue that young? Because you've been playing, God, since I remember. I'm telling you, you've been playing these first shooter games since you were like my son's age.
At the time, I was playing Halo when I was around his age. Halo was my shooting game, and I'd say it still is. Halo's my shooting game, but I never being his age, especially playing Halo, what really interested me about the Halo franchise being a kid was more of the story. You know, you've got this dude in a giant suit, big guns, and he's going out, killing a bunch of aliens to save the world. That to me was really cool. But I never, I never once thought that this was going to turn me into some violent person or that it was going to cause me to do any atrocious acts of violence. Because at the core of that game, it's a game about heroism, and he's saving the world. So how do you go from saving the world to his shooting?
Yeah.
I think that's something that a lot of people also misunderstand. A game can be violent, of course, but there's also the fact that what's the game actually about? Sure, there's violence in it, but my greatest example again is going to be Halo. You look at Halo. It's a game where you've got this old military soldier going out and saving the world. Really, that's what he's doing. He's saving the universe from a great threat, and it's an act of heroism. So, in that sense, I'm not getting anything bad from that. He's doing a good act, and sure, there's violence, but similarly, some of the Call of Duties can go down that route. I believe it was Modern Warfare 2 that unfortunately has the infamous airport shooting where for the sake of the story he went and you were forced to shoot innocent people at an airport, but that's about, from what I know, that's among the most controversial in terms of because of how realistic it is in our history with things of airports, that it could cause such a big fuss. But that's definitely about it as far as anything goes of real, in terms of violence, that even would make me kind of second guess what kind of game I'm playing.
Yeah.
But I can't say that I've had a problem or that I know anybody else that's had that sort of problem where they've played first-person shooter or any shooter of that sort that has ever had the idea of taking up a gun.
Yeah. Well, because I'm a parent, this is what I'm gonna say. In my opinion, some of the listeners out there are probably my age too. Um, if you're a parent and you should know what your kid is doing or what your kid's into. You know, I like video games, so I make sure to know what my kid's playing. I just feel that if you don't know what your kid is doing, even as a teenager, you should be involved or know what your kid is playing or what he's into and stuff like that. I get it. I also get the fact that as kids get older, they're more independent. They try to hide stuff from parents, but still, video games you should know what's going on. I just feel that parents should be more involved when it comes to video games, not just here, just buy it and then not caring
Oh,
about what's
definitely.
going on.
I think that's a very important factor, having your parents there to kind of guide you between what you is right and what isn't right. You know, to tell you, hey, this is fantasy and this is reality. That's just in the game, and that's not how things work out here.
Yeah.
So having a very involved parent, I think, can help a lot of children that might think otherwise, that might get the wrong idea. But at the same time, I also think that some parents just aren't concerned with what their kids are playing. I think there's there's a point to where parents just think games are games. There's nothing too bad about them, and the games that are, well, they're just games. Like they don't fully understand the extent of what games can be. For example, things just games in general. Some parents might give their kids money because they want to go buy a game, but the parents don't care what game they're gonna buy. To them it's just a game. So to that end, that's why sometimes you've got like 12-year-olds walking into, I don't know who still does, but for those who still walk into a GameStop and buy a game. And nowadays, since everything is digital, it's much easier for kids to buy things like Call of Duty, those rated M games that they shouldn't be, because all they need is mom's credit card. Hey, mom, let me buy this game. You're like, oh, sure. They're not too involved in it. They just think their kid is going to buy a game. Here, use it real quick.
Yeah.
So I think if parents were more involved in knowing what their children were playing, that would probably help us kind of set them straight. Don't do anything stupid. I know what you're playing, and and this is just how things work in the real world, and what you're playing is just a game, and leave it at that. Don't take it for anything more than just a game.
Well, let me throw some facts again, some statistics before I forget. I mean, I think this is a big part of what people are, when they listen to this episode, they want to hear some statistics. So I got it off. It's called the Business Insider, and this is a survey that was done in 2017. So I just want to read a little bit real quick. So according to the Entertainment Software Association, or the ESA survey, 65% of households have at least one member who plays video games 3 hours a week or more. The average gamer is about 35 years old. So it's roughly around my age. Of the gaming population, there are more adult women, 31%, than boys under 18, 18%. Of people who play video games, 59% are male and 41% are female. So 41% of females, that means there's a lot of girls playing video games too.
Yeah. Now, in terms of people around your age, I think a lot of that is more of a nostalgic factor. For people like you who might love Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter, I think that's probably one of the games that they're pretty heavily invested in. As they're growing up and they're going to the arcade and they're playing Street Fighter, then all of a sudden it comes to your home consoles, and each year a better looking version of this game comes out. And you just keep, racking those games in because it's got such a nostalgic feature of when you were a kid yourself, going to these arcades and spending an hour or two and all the quarters you could.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I can kind of understand, 35-year-olds, as they've seen games from the very first Nintendo, the Sega Genesis, things of that sort, coming up as they're growing, and now they're here where games are the most advanced that they've ever been.
Yeah.
like some of the greatest looking graphics and the most realistic that anybody has really seen in video games. So I would think that somebody who was invested as a teen going to arcades back then would definitely be invested now, as things are so much more advanced and the kinds of games you can play have expanded it greatly. There's so many games that cover so many areas and genres that there's just too many.
Yeah.
And I think for that reason that you've got a lot of people of all ages playing. There's a little bit of something for everyone.
Okay, well, you brought this up to me off the air. Long-term and short-term effects. So what do you think a long-term effect would be at just these violent games?
Okay, so I think what you can expect for long-term effects, this is somebody who's obviously still got the effects of, for the sake of it, a violent game in their head. This would mean that if they're presented with some sort of conflict, how they go about deciding it. Do they, just to kind of shorten it down, are they taking the level-headed side of things, or are they going to go the more violent route? And that violent route, that violent decision is in there because of the long-term effects of the game that they had played. So let's say that they're playing a very violent game, for example, Mortal Kombat. And for whatever reason, the thought crosses their mind, hey, I can just beat this guy up violently to get what I want. Because that's how Mortal Kombat allows you to solve conflicts, through violence. You have to get through somewhere in Mortal Kombat and just beat them up.
Yeah.
So in the same sense, the long-term effects are going to be, you are more likely to choose the violent decision. Those are the long-term effects. And for short-term, it doesn't mean you're going to go through with it. Let's make that clear right off the bat, because I know some people might get confused there. Short-term effects solely mean that the thought crosses your mind. Let's say you're presented with the same thing. How do you go about it? Do you take the peaceful route, or do you beat them up? The thought might cross your mind, hey, I could beat them up, but it doesn't go any further than that. And that's very important, because with long-term, you are more likely to actually decide upon it. Like, there is an actual chance that you will be deciding upon this. While short-term, it's just a thought. You yourself know. Sometimes it can go as far as like a little chuckle, like, well, maybe I could beat him up for it, but it's just a joke. You don't really mean it. The thought crossed your mind, of course, and that could be a short-term effect. The thought crossed your mind. That doesn't mean that you're any more likelier than somebody who's level-headed to make that decision. Now, of course, if it's long-term, you do have a decent likelihood to go ahead and decide to beat somebody else senselessly to get what you want.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. To me, long-term, short-term effects on playing video games or violent video games, maybe it has, maybe it doesn't. But I take it as it is. Video games are exactly what movies are. They're a form of entertainment, and that's it. That's it. They're fun, and people either like them or they don't like them.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best way to take a video game, just a form of entertainment. The way I'd put it is, for some games, it's just an interactive movie. It's got a great story, it looks good, it's an interactive movie. Other times, it's just a fighting game. But, there's no other way to take it as just entertainment, the most interactive entertainment that we probably have today, at least in terms of technologically interactive entertainment.
So we're getting to that point where we're almost done with the podcast, but I want to ask you, at least two questions. And this one is because you're a long-term or a long time. I don't see you stopping playing video games, so you're going to be in that community for a long time.
Very long time.
I'm going to give the mic to you. I want you to express or tell me or defend your community.
Okay, well, I think for those who already understand video games and how they function as a form of entertainment, that we all need to understand that for those who might blame video games, they could be using it as a scapegoat. There could be deeper issues at the root, and unfortunately, video games are just at the front. People, media, they want a headline. Video games are the cause, and they try to use statistics statistics that might say, hey, there could be a connection, but not a direct cause. And people like politicians, like the media, are going to go ahead and put video games up at the front. But as a community, I think we all need to understand that no matter how hard they try to pin it on video games, the fact is that we are just a small fraction, a minute fraction of what could be causing violence, what could be. And those who are taking these violent games and putting it into action, there is a deeper issue at its core than video games themselves. It is the people who are completely taking it in the wrong direction, that are either using it as a scapegoat to escape responsibilities, or there's just something not clicking with them. And for that reason, everyone who doesn't play video games, I think you should do a little more research to try to better understand. If you have kids especially, understand that as long as you're there to help guide them, they're never going to fall into that category of just, doing the wrong thing and trying to pin it on video games. So, the gaming community it's a lovely community of people. Of course, we do have our bad apples here and there, as every community does.
Exactly.
But as a community, it's great. For the most part, it's healthy, and we're just another community of people doing what we love. Just like there's a community of people who enjoy golf, just like there's a community of people who enjoy, swimming. In the same way, we are just that, a community of people enjoying what we do.
Exactly. I think everything you said there, every example you mentioned right now, these same problems with the gaming community or violent games, the NRA, which is the National Rifle Association, is having exactly or similar kind of like problems, because it's either the video games that are causing these problems, or the right to bear arms.
Well, yeah. So when it comes to the Second Amendment, for example, and I was having this conversation with somebody else not too long ago about gun restriction, in terms of because of violence and the fact that it could be related to games, and since first-person shooters are among the more violent games, of whether or not there should be more gun restrictions. And of course, I know how deeply rooted our Second Amendment is, and just how strongly people feel about their Second Amendment and their rights to bear arms.
Yeah.
Now, the odd part is, to me, is I have never exactly had a very strong opinion on either side of whether there needs to be more gun control, on whether there shouldn't be. I think in this case, there just happens to be a rise in problems. And I don't feel like you can blame the NRA or anyone else really, and try to say, hey, we need to be more restrictive with guns. This is, for now, I don't know whether I should call it widespread or not. It's certainly a problem. Thankfully, it's not happening every other day, but definitely more often than anybody would ever hope. But the fact is for the most part, I would say it's more people knowing who and where this gun is rather than where I can buy it from.
Yeah.
For example, the 18-year-old with Madden, I highly doubt he went to just go buy a gun. More than likely, he knows where dad kept the gun, and he went to go take it. Now, in this case, you might be able to blame the dad that he didn't lock it up. Or maybe the dad did lock it up and the son knew where the key was. At that point, whose fault is it? Is it dad's fault? Is it the kid's fault? There's too many factors to put the blame on one thing. And you try to, put the blame on, oh, hey, it's gun control. In the same sense, I kind of feel like you're doing the same thing that politicians do with video games. Hey, it's real easy to say games are causing the violence. Hey, you know what's usually present in these violence? Guns. Put more gun control. And for the people who know how to use guns, who are responsible with their weapons, that's not what they want. They want the freedom that they currently have to purchase these weapons and the way that they do.
Yeah.
So I just think that we need to be a little more level-headed on that front too, and have a little more understanding for those who do enjoy buying their weapons and enjoying their Second Amendment the way that they are. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Okay, well, we're just gonna leave it there because I mean this topic and it's very controversial. And I would just want to tell the listeners that we are not experts, even though you sound like an expert. But we are not experts, and this is our opinion. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that this is our opinions, and we're just having a conversation. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't think any side is wrong. There's definitely reason for people to believe that violence could be caused by video games, and there's even more reason to believe that there should be more gun control. There are very sound arguments for both sides, while I might say the arguments are a little less sound for violence and video games specifically, in terms of things like gun control relating to that particular type of violence. I say there's definitely sound argument on both sides. There's reason for concern. And I can definitely understand why people might be very interested in the topic of whether video games are causing violence. And I think the short answer is no. And the long answer has been this conversation.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to leave it there. You have any final thoughts that you want to say?
Final thoughts-wise, I would say, as a parent, be invested in what your kids are playing. Teach them and help them understand what's right and what's wrong. As a person, just be level-headed, use common sense, don't do anything stupid, and don't think that you can do what you do in video games in real life. And just use it as a form of entertainment.
Yeah. Specifically what you were going to say, I was going to say. But my final thoughts is, video games is just that. It's entertainment. It's just a game. Like you said, more parents should know what's going on in their kids' lives. And then if you don't want your kid or whoever playing too much video games, maybe it's time to just step outside and do what kids used to do back in the 70s and 60s is play outside. Take your kids to sports. Have them play in the park more. Be more active. But obviously, times are changing and electronics are everywhere. So that's the thing. So this is Gus. And I have Anthony here, and thanks, Anthony, for being on the Everything Goes podcast.
Of course, it's been a pleasure.
I truly enjoyed it. I know this is our second take because yesterday's recording was not sounding great, so we had to do it all over again. So, yeah.
That was a long session, too.
Yeah. No, but, hey, it was a good one.
Oh, it was a good one.
Yeah, so remember, everybody, it's our opinions. We are not experts, but it's just a topic that everybody's talking about. It's a topic that everybody's talking about, and I just feel that video games are gonna be video games. I don't think the violence is going anywhere with these video games either. They're so popular. Movies are so popular. The Avengers are so popular. It's not going anywhere. So we got to learn a better way to deal with these things, not just say that the NRA or video games is the problem. And that's just it. I'm gonna leave it there. And this is Gus with the Everything Goes podcast. Thank you, Anthony, for being on the show.
Again, always a pleasure to be here.
Remember, you guys always could catch us on the Everything Goes podcast on Instagram, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you like, leave a message, leave a rating, and be very grateful if you guys do that. So if you like, hit that like button, subscribe, share with your friends. Yeah, that's it, guys. So thanks, Anthony, for being on the Everything Goes podcast. I got to bring you more often, man. You sound like an expert.
Well, thank you. I try.
So you don't have anything to say on the where can the people catch you on, right? You don't have a Twitch account or an Instagram or anything like that?
No, for the most part, if I'm going to be anywhere, it's going to be here. That's where I'm going to be.
Oh, man. So what game you playing? You go back and playing video games right now?
Game that I'm playing currently, Rainbow Six Siege. Another gun game.
All right, Anthony. So thank you for coming on the Everything Else podcast, and I'll catch you guys next week.
Bye.